Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Equip with Strength podcast. I'm super excited today to have Steve Cotter. Steve, actually, you and I had an interview way like 10 years ago now, believe it or not. And it was back when we did like the blog written interview. So I really appreciate you coming on now to do this video podcast.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's truly my pleasure.
So one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on, there's a few reasons actually. It's always nice to sort of catch up, and it's like a decade later. I'm curious to hear what sort of changed for you, and especially your training modality and things like that. But there was a couple of things you said to me at a workshop in, I think it was Belfast or Dublin or somewhere. It was back in 2012.
I think Belfast, yeah.
Belfast. We were talking about, I was a nurse at the time, and you'd mentioned something about this. It was about calling, basically the industry in which I worked was like the sickness industry. And that really stuck with me because I was wanting to leave that and go into more of a wellness and helping people before they got to the point of needing that cardiac surgery or needing that whatever it was that had gone wrong. And this is sort of really stuck with me. But what I'm seeing now in the industry, in the fitness industry, is this mentality of that you're already broken, and this telling people that they're broken and things like that. So as a coach, I really want to encourage people to see themselves as working toward health. And I've recently heard one of your interviews. You were on a podcast, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was, you're talking about the mind-body connection, and also just sort of weaving that into basically a wellness picture versus I need to fix a bunch of things and I'm already doomed. So can you tell me a little bit about maybe a background to that, but also because that's what the IKFF is, one of the goals is mind-body connection. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that and sort of where that fits into the picture of wellness?
Yes, thank you. And it's great to see you doing so well here on this side of the pond. Last time when we talked and met in person, you were on the other side. So nice to have you over here with us Americans.
Yes.
So yeah, it has evolved. And as you mentioned, I mentioned that, I guess, a decade ago, and about the sickness industry. There's a few things I will say in that intro. I think part of I don't want to say problem, but part of the challenge, because we have the same objective. We want to improve the quality of life. We want to help to empower individuals to help ourselves. So I would say that I'm here to serve more so than to help, because we have to help ourselves. And so if I can provide service to someone who is willing to do the difficulties and the inner work, that's a service, so there's always going to be a maturation process with our understanding. First and foremost, I'm a student. I've always been a student. I will always remain a student. And that allows me to retain the possibility that I may be wrong about certain things, or that I'm open to the possibility of new information, better information, all with the goal of more understanding. So the only thing I really speak about is my experience. I value experience more than opinion, because as the saying goes, who feels it knows it. And when we do it, and we've done it many times, we have a certain mind-body connection in that sense, where there's a muscle memory, as we call it. So most of my formulation of these ideas, it comes just through my personal practice, which is now going on 40 years. When I, as an athletic little kid, began formal training in martial arts at 12 years old. Now I'm 51 years old. So coming on 40 years of physical culture and exposure to philosophy and exposure to the physical education. And so I agree with you completely. In so you mentioned the idea that fitness is focusing a lot upon the idea that we're broken. And yes, I agree with you that, and in a similar vein of the medical, you mentioned industry. So I would say that the challenge is the industry itself, and the fact that we refer to these things as industries. It's a reflection of an era, which in my opinion is an archaic and bygone era, which we called the industrial age. And I believe we're in a different era, which we now call the information age, and globalization. And there's a lot of different ways of defining globalization. There's political context and economic context, but the general idea that we are all interconnected, the World Wide Web and the smart technology is just an apparatus which we interact with on a daily basis. And in fact, you're sitting across the country. So we have this integration and globalization, and we're really in an information era. And we see these modifications with the biomedical integration, where, and there's lots of statistics, and I'm not a geek in those things, although if I come across it, I pay attention. There are statistics that say that if you're born, after 2000, your lifespan is now, so those of us that were born in the 70s, we're expected to probably live into our 90s now or more. Those that were born in the 1990s are probably going to live, 100 and 110. And so on. So, and then combining that with the advancements in biomedical, I know that we're going to eventually mature. We're going to mature to the point where it's not so invasive, and it's not so, like you speak about, the broken. So taking it all down to simple things, my expertise is in the physical education, and you referred to the mind body. I refer to that. I refer more specifically to the mind body breath, and this idea of the three is a magic number. You have 3, 6, and 9. Tesla spoke about it. There's the Trinity, the Holy Triad. Religions, we understand that the number 3 is a very special number. And so this sort of adage of the mind, body, and spirit, right, that we hear about, it's often associated with mysticism or Eastern philosophies. And what does that actually mean? So what I was left with was just this physical body and a curiosity. And so I devoted my life towards movement. And in that process of studying movement and martial arts, I came to find that I would accelerate faster if I would start teaching others. So I started teaching, but it was a selfish aim initially as a young teenage boy. I'm going to get better if I start teaching. Okay, I'll start teaching. So then, and it's led me on this path. And, we met over in Ireland, and led me on this ability to go around the world. And so my ideas about this is really just based on a lifetime longitudinal study on myself and on results, and that I'm 51 and I'm able to perform at a high level. And again, we're all only human. And there's a lot we don't know. There's the unseen and unexperienced world that's out there that's much bigger than this material existence that we're familiar with. And we know that we're only here for a short time. We lose loved ones, we lose parents, we lose pets, we lose siblings. So we're in this cycle, but we're far enough along to understand that there's so much that we don't know. And so we're constantly seeking to learn more and more. And, so if we bring it back down to I'm sorry to your viewers where you feel I'm not going anywhere with this conversation, because ultimately what I really want to say in simple terms is we have the ability to take responsibility for our own well-being. Mm-hmm. And so the evolution, initially, it was just a kid. I wanted to get stronger, bigger. I wanted girls to notice me when I was a teenager, all these things, bodybuilding, and not really bodybuilding, but, this mindset of like, oh, look good and get noticed, right? And that's something that everyone goes through. And hopefully in life, we do that when we're younger so that we're not older and still looking around for like, that stuff. But the point is that that path led me to become more interested in the integration of everything, where we are and where we're going. So we look at the health industry, we look at the food industry, we look at the fitness industry. These are industrialized models. What is the industry doing? It's about trinkets. The industry is a production model that's based on creating a mass, a consumer culture, which America, we're not the best at everything anymore, but we're the king of the consumers. It started here. And, now you have other cultures that have looked at America and say, we're going to do it bigger and better. And you look at what's happening in China with now their consumer crazy. But the point is that the industrial is for profit. There's a small group of people that are at the top of that are benefiting. And then you have the worker class. We're coming out of that. We've already evolved out of that. Now we have the ability where if you're born a pauper, you can become a king or a prince. And if you're, or a princess or a queen, like the barriers to entry for success, there's still barriers that exist, but we've transcended so far beyond, if you look back even over a couple hundred years. Not across the whole world. There's still slavery, there's still bondage, there's still economic debt, in which case that affects many people. So we're not out of it, but the point is we have the ability to take control of our own lives. The information is accessible, and health education, that's what we're here for. So movement is medicine. Breathing. So this mind, body, and breath, this trinity, we know exactly what we're referring to. We can integrate. We can integrate in these ideas of the mind, body, and spirit, or what does that mean? So the body is the absolute that we know. We are existing in this body. We can touch it. We can feel it, pain, all of these things. And we see life and we see death. And so that's the one thing that everyone can say for sure, my body. When we speak about the mind, there's a little bit of a detachment from the practical, but for the most part, we all have a general idea of what we're talking about when we speak about the mind. We can have a lot of definitions. There's the brain, there's the cognition, there's the awareness, okay? But we understand there's this thinking aspect, which we call the mind. So we have a very good grasp of those things, but the spirit, well, that's something that has created wars and perpetuates wars. Just the discussion of what does that mean and how do we define it? Because is there a name, and do you have to participate in a particular group in order to have access to these things, right? So when we change the word spirit to breath, now we're closing the cycle, and now we have the breath. And we understand that intimately, and we have the body, and we understand that intimately. And so now with the breath and the body, what that means in practical terms is we're coordinating our movement with our breathing, whatever the movement is, whether it's just simple inhale, exhale, or whatever the movement. So, and yourself and other high-level coaches with a lot of experience, you're always going to teach breathing when you teach movement. Right? You're going to tell them, okay, you're going to breathe like this. And in doing that, in being aware of that, with the movement and the breath, that's where the mind is integrated, because we have to think about the breath. We have to be aware of the breath. Contrasting that on those times when we feel out of control, there's always going to be an association with an irregular breathing or not breathing. Holding the breath, we get frightened and or we're stressed, and in that moment we are paralyzed. So we're talking about practical application, what you're doing, what I'm doing, and we have different techniques and different methods, but it's the same overall goal: to serve, to help ourselves by helping others. Because the greatest gift is when you can uplift someone. That is as if you're gifting something to yourself. So, again, I said a lot of things because it's just
big. It's a big topic.
Body of work, but we can bring it down to simple steps. And we have to understand that the narrative, the story, and kind of even the intro, where we have this fitness industry, we have this okay, for a car, right? For a trinket, you're going to buy we're producing tens of thousands at a time. There's no differentiation. But when we're talking about human beings, there's tremendous differentiation. We're talking about life forms, right? Not mechanical objects. And somehow our culture has adapted this mechanical model for the life that we live. And this is creating, that's to me, the ultimate corruption that is creating, if we're talking about medicine, we're talking about a disease industry that is profiting, that is capitalizing upon illness. Whereas if I'm a doctor and I'm working in that field, and it's not a problem with the doctors because they mean well, then the nurses, they want to help, but it's the system of education where if you're going to operate within it, there is corruption there. And if you want to operate outside of it, well, good luck, because now you're taking on powerful interests. You know, and again, it's better than it was a decade, 2 decades, 3. At least now we have integrated medicine. We have things like acupuncture and herbology and massage that are integrated in a society where you have options that, you know what, I hurt my knee. I don't want to go on painkillers. I don't want to get a surgery at the first recommendation. I want to consider, is there another path? But I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing, I know, you know, that pill is going to make me feel no pain. And, you know, the surgery, it's going to be fast, you know, and I'm not saying surgery may or may not be the answer. I'm not diagnosing anyone. That's not my role, but I can think about it for myself and we can talk about it and we can make the decision that is most productive for the long term versus just the short term relief, because easy now, hard later, and vice versa. And that's why we train, and, you know, because I'm going to really push myself to the edge in this so that the rest of my life, when I'm faced with hardship, I have some experience. And you know what, I didn't fold last time. I'm not going to fold this time, right? It makes us stronger. It makes us resilient. But, you know, the industry is what we need to move at in terms of problem solution. If I'm identifying that the problem is the focus on industry, well, now the solution I'm proposing is that we need to move out of that. And it starts with how we think, and it starts with our language, because in the beginning was the word. And, you know, words are power and words create stories, but it's not just the spoken word, it's also the invisible, unspoken word. And that's the language that we are speaking to ourselves, and the things we believe and the things that we pass along without critical assessment. And so how are we going to change is we have to be the change, and I have to be the change. So I use specific language, not always. I'm just a human. We make mistakes, but, you know, that's my objective. And we start crafting a narrative that is not the narrative that we inherited from our ancestors, our parents. God bless them. They did their best. And some of us have good relationships and some of us had bad relationships and some of us are uncertain. Okay, but there's a line, and we descend, and these stories get passed along. Okay, and just because something was practical and useful and valuable 200 years ago doesn't mean it's necessarily valuable to us right now. And at the rate of exponential growth, those periods of time are much smaller now. So we're now, in certain cases, 3 years, we can talk about something is outdated, and 10 years, it can be archaic. You know, it's both scary and exciting, but we're here. We're here, and we're here for a reason. So we're going to adapt to these rapid changes. I'm a true believer that the foundation and the salvation is through the physical fitness. The physical education is the salvation, because we have to take responsibility for this temple that we are provided in. And there's no time to wish that it was someone else's, or yes, we want to be better. That's the whole goal. And so the dialogue has to change, the narratives have to change, and we have to, as individuals, take responsibility for that change.
When you say
I
like
don't know how
the
many children, at least one child, right? How many
Mhm.
children do you have?
One.
One. So you have a child, I have children, many of our listeners have children. It is our responsibility to leave the world a better place. Now, we're not in that age group yet, right? But there will come a time when we check out. And so the work that we do now is the work that is left behind. And so it's super important that the mature adults of this generation make a decision that we're going to start changing the thought processes within ourselves to create the world that we say that we want, and not wait around for some external powers that be. That is not the true power. The true power is not the government. It's not any of these things, okay? Because there's a greater power that has created all of it, you know, or whatever you want to believe. It's not for me to impose my beliefs around upon anyone. But let's just say that we have to stop thinking every election cycle that, oh, this is the solution. Because you hate that one so much, so we replace it with this. It's this. It's divide and conquer, and it's the Roman way, and it's Nero, and they said it, and they're still doing it, and we're still playing into it. And so this compliance with stuff that is bad and wrong and doesn't serve our highest well-being, people have to make a stand for themselves. I make a stand for myself. How? I take care of my physical well-being and my emotional and mental well-being. I take care of my family, and I put in an honest day's effort for an honest day's salary, and I don't steal from people, and I just keep to myself, and that's how I do it, right? And we can't do everything perfect, because in the sense of the ideal, we're not there yet. We would love to say that, oh, I have my garden and I have my wild, if you want to eat meat, you know, which I don't, but if you do, okay, so I have my wild, you know, animals that are raised, you know, harmoniously with nature, and, you know, my milk comes fresh from the cow, and I have my basil garden, and that's what we should all have, but we don't. Most of us, if we live in the cities, we got to go to the store, and we got to pick through the best that we can afford, and that, right? And so there's so much room for improvement in the food and the food industry, and the medicine and the medical industry, and the fitness and the fitness industry, and these other things. And what I think a lot of it starts is move out of this idea about industry, because what industry is based on, it's an economic model that's based on whoever is producing and distributing and selling the goods. It's not focused on the consumer.
Right.
His
Absolutely.
best interest. And if it's not focused on the consumer's best interest, well, if there's more profit in making it, if I can make more money making the food cheaper because it's grown in the lab, and, you know, and politically and through the legal system, it can be manipulated such that it's not illegal for me to sell these poisons, which is what they are, but they're poisons that the FDA says, oh, well, it's not a poison because it doesn't kill you immediately. It's going to kill you over the course of 50 years, and it's going to deteriorate you little by little, because the truth is, you know, there's a reason why, and again, I don't speak about religion or anything. The books, there's books, okay? There's ancient books, is the history of humanity, whether you know the Bible, and there's many different, okay, but in these books, different languages, different names, but same stories, you know, those people lived for a very, very long time, right? I don't know, literally, did Methuselah live to be 968? I don't know, but the records show that they lived long. And now we have situations where people at the age of 80, they're on their deathbed. And I don't think that's that long of a lifespan. So I don't know. You have people like Dave Asprey that's into the more scientific Silicon Valley idea that, okay, I'm going to live to be 140. I don't care about that either, because we're here. The time that we have is the time that we have, but let's take care of ourselves while we're here, it starts with the physical education. That's movement and breathing, range of motion. We have mobility, and we need a certain amount of endurance. Why? Because we have to be able to exist throughout our days. And we need a certain amount of strength because we need to be able to lift the things in our life and lift ourselves. You don't have to be a power lifter. You don't have to be a marathon runner. You don't have to be a yogi, but you need a certain amount of mobility, a certain amount of strength, a certain amount of endurance. Our mental well-being is crucial. Where does that start? Well, I'm not a licensed psychiatrist or a psychologist. However, I care about people, and I've done the work within myself. The greatest power in the universe is love. The greatest force that exists is love, and it's what has created us. So, and created everything. And, you know, there's misunderstandings about this because even love has been corrupted by companies like Disney, okay, where the idea of love is this romantic Beauty and the Beast, and that kind of love is fleeting. That kind of love is temporary, and it's not real in the sense that it can be given and it can be taken away. I love you, now I don't love you anymore. There's another kind of love that is an energy. It's an energy, and it's not based in the emotional space. It's based in the creative space. And that's the love that gives us this amazing opportunity that we have to be in these bodies and to exist. We're the evolution of creation as human beings. We have a tree can't up and walk and change its place. A tree has to stay there for the rest of its life. And maybe that's beautiful, but you know, humans, we have the ability to move about and experience things. So any mindset that's based on, oh, life is misery, you got to change the story that you're speaking to yourself. How do you do that? You got to love yourself. And the emotion and the pain and all those things, there's a process that each person can learn to work through. However, at a fundamental level, we are love and we are light. And you want to, if you're an academic and you're a scientist and you only science is your God, well, let's just say that the nervous system is a conduit for electrical energy, or energy that can be very similar to electricity, we would say, in its behaviors. So you look at the spine, the spinal cord and the nervous system and how it articulates throughout the entire body. And you look at the next time it rains and the lightning in the sky, and you're going to see a lot of similarities. In effect, we are light. And the nervous system pulsates energy, and it gives us this amazing opportunity to have inspiration and to move around. So the foundation for all of it is the physical education. Within the physical education, we can develop the mental discipline. And again, discipline. Does it mean, oh, I was in the army, or I had a father that was very strict, or one of my parents used to hit me? That's not discipline. Okay, I'm talking about discipline as something that we choose for ourselves. And so we learn levels of discipline within the training itself. And that's the mind and the body, where's my breath? Where's my movement? What is the objective of what I'm doing? And so then we learn to do every rep perfect. What does perfect mean? Well, a snowflake's perfect. And the cool thing about a snowflake is there's no two that are alike. Every snowflake is a unique snowflake. And we are the unique snowflakes. Okay, so my perfect is not defined necessarily the same way that your perfect is, yet we are already perfect. And it doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. The mistakes are teachers. We have to fall to learn to stand up. We have to lose to understand what not to do so that we can eventually win. And, you know, education, physical, the body, education. And that's moving forward in our own lives, our families, our communities, our civilizations, our nations, and our world. And I don't have the answer. Maybe a guy that's smarter than me, maybe Elon Musk has the answer. Maybe the answer is we're going to fly to some other planet because we've given up because we've just destroyed this one.
Destroyed this one.
Right? I don't know.
Start
But
again.
I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on right here, right now, through the body. We can make ourselves better. We can develop more skill. We can develop more discipline. We can develop more control. And I believe a strong society consists of strong citizens. And the way to get to that point is those of us within fitness, instead of being in an industry thinking how you're going to make your next dollar, and that's a practical concern, especially in the economic system we exist in. And I don't know, maybe blockchain or these or the fix for that, where we're not going to be beholden to the government and the oil companies and these military operations. And that's the economic model where you have to be corrupt just to make money so you can eat. Okay, so I'm very sensitive to the fact that sometimes we all have to do things we don't like to do, and you have to pay the bills. And, you know, however, mindset, we can change the mindset, we can change the language, and that over time, the infrastructures will change. And the infrastructures are changing, but they're not changing fast enough for us to see it, and fast enough for what we think we would like. But we will inherit that earth when we are ready to, So what I'm saying is that we have to take responsibility for our health. And how I'm defining health is fitness is a component of health. Health is a component of well-being. Well-being, well, that's a life well lived. That's a life where you wake up out of bed and you're excited and you feel good when you go to bed at night, and you help as many people along the way. You serve along the way, because I think that's the real purpose. We are all here to serve in some way. And I have theories about what that means, but you know, maybe this is not the format. Let's just say that, let's stop talking about race, because there's no races. There's the human race. There's different tribes, ancestry of different tribe, different colors, different hair, different eyes, but those are small differences that are not important. We live in a global community. Your child is the most important to you, and my children are the most important to me. However, I also recognize that your child is just as important as mine, and everyone's children are important, right? And so we need the space to be able to be not so focused on our own stress, to where we can look at what is my purpose for being here? Why am I here? And what am I here to do? And let's start moving on that. And if you're in a generation where you feel like you missed that opportunity, because let's face it, that's not what, these conversations weren't really happening, maybe in closed doors a long time ago. But you know, now we have the possibility that a child you have billionaires that are 17, 18 years old. And I'm not saying the goal is to be a billionaire, but I'm saying that it's so exciting now for children to come into this world, because they can do anything. They can create, and you know, like, that's progress. That's progress, because your ancestors in some cases were working in factories when they were 8 years old, not that long ago, in a lot of different cultures in the quote unquote civilized world. So, you know, and women weren't voting 100 years ago, right? There's so many progressions. And, you know, granted, slavery was outlawed in US in 1865, but actually nothing really changed until the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it took 100 years to even enact any real legislation. But the point being is that even there, we see progress, right? We see progress. And so we have to keep progressing, but we have to progress faster. And the way we progress faster is we have to critically analyze important components of our life and consider what's the language that we're using and how are we communicating this. And don't just go along with everything that everyone's doing. Like, develop the self-identity where you have the ability to speak out against things that are wrong. Because Who wants to be the person in the New York subway that just stands around watching while some man beats somebody up or whatever, just because you lack the courage to confront evil? And that's what we're talking about. And, you know, there is good and there is evil, but we have to focus on the good. We have to focus on the good, because love is the greatest power. And that starts with ourselves. And, you know, if I don't like myself, if I don't love myself, if I don't forgive myself, it's going to be, I don't want to say impossible, but you're not creating the environment for healing. And there needs to be healing. And we use movement for healing. We use many different modalities. Nutrition is healing. Let thy food be thy medicine. So the nutrition is fundamental. And when we're talking about nutrition on a macro level, we're talking about the foods that we consume. We're also talking about the elimination, because it's a cycle. It's in and out. It's not just in. And we're also talking on the greater sense of nutrition, meaning what we're feeding our minds and what we're consuming in terms of media, all kinds of media. And, you know, so anyway, to bring it back, I get so excited. And
I can tell.
forgive me if I lost some of you. It's not for everyone, I understand. It's, you know, I'm just sharing my ideas, but I want to take it to, you know, to practical. You know, there's many good sources of information. I'm one source of information. What I do is I teach people these fundamentals of mind, body, breath. Our breathing is the foundation, because the breathing is the universal quality. Everything starts with the breath. If you want to test that theory, stop breathing. See what happens. Okay. So everyone breathes, and that's the singular universal quality that everyone's doing right now in this moment. Movement, I would say, would be a close second. And we could say that everyone also moves. Everyone breathes and everyone moves. However, there's range of differences in both of those things, in the way that we breathe and in the way that we move. There's levels of restriction to all of these things. We can be barely breathing because it's very restricted. We can be barely moving because it's, you know, then you have certain anomalies, you have certain what you would call disabilities. You know, it can be congenital, could be through an injury, you know. And then we have this emotional idea, which we talk about, which is pain. And in my opinion, my self-discovery and what I observe and what I believe more through observation and through experience is pain is mostly an emotional reaction. It's mostly it's a psychosomatic emotional, in the sense of the way that the individual identifies with trauma, different kinds of trauma. And even to the point where we bring it down, what I would call the, you know, the psychosomatic, where, oh, I have a pain in my back, I have a pain in my shoulder. And here I am saying, oh, well, you know, what are you holding on to? What's the problem? You know, no, I hurt my knee, right? I was running and I twisted it and my knee hurts, right? It's mechanical. It can be both, okay? Because there's a greater awareness that is outside of our conscious recognition, that maybe there's a reason you stepped in that pothole and twisted your knee, because maybe you did it to yourself on purpose because you need some experience, right? And so whatever, but pain is stored like a memory in our cellular structure. So we are like computers in the sense, and light and energy body, and we have these cells, and these cells can be I don't know, there's people that know more about computers than I do, right? So maybe but you know, like a computer, we have these hardware and software, and we have databases, right? And we have programs, and these programs can be running, and like a computer that's maybe an older computer, or it's maybe outdated, you can have programs running that actually, you know, I didn't even know I had that program. It's just been running in the background, but I don't know anything about computers, right? And there's programs running right now in our bodies that for the most part, most of us are not aware at all.
Mm-hmm.
And there's varying degrees in awareness, but so that back pain, yes, it's back pain, but it may not be solved by, oh, let me give you a massage in your back, or here's a shot, or here's a surgery. It may be some deeper work that is going to get up and under that.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes from going within ourselves. And so taking the conversation full circle, how do we do that? Well, it's through movement.
Mm-hmm.
It's through the exercise. And, and again, the language, if you have an aversion to exercise, you mentioned, Marianne, the idea of, you didn't use the word punishment, but the what'd you say about the fitness industry?
That, yeah, kind of, it assumes, it doesn't really assume. I think as a general culture, we feel broken and dysfunctional, and that the industry almost runs with that. And because it's that consumerism, right? That industry mindset of you have a void, you need something, and I've got the thing that you need. So the thing I've got will fix you, and come with me and I'll take you on my path. And it sort of sucks people in, and then they look for more and more things because they can't do everything perfectly. Instead of what you're saying is more like the individual matters, and that we have to work with that individual and let them explore and express their own unique way of moving within the bounds of what's generally better versus, we don't get too nitpicky on things, but we allow for that individual flair type of thing, instead of like, you're not trying to be their guru, you're trying to be their guide.
Yes. And we have our skill sets, we have our experience, we have our interests. And so I have many years of moving, and I have a body of work where, look, I can show you that when you're in your 50s like I am, and when you're in your 60s, I can already see, I know when I'm in my 70s and 80s, maybe I won't live that long. Maybe that some wave will hit me, or I don't know. But, I'm going to still be doing the same things that I've been doing, and I'm going to continue to do. And it's because the narrative, like, who says that because you're 80, that means that now you need a cane and you're going to fall and break your hip and rapidly? Who says that? Because you saw your grandmother do that, or you heard about, and we're seeing this. I don't want to assume any ages. I believe you're younger. I'm sure you're younger than me, but for general purposes, you're a mom. I'm at the top of the end, you're at the bottom end, same generation, I would say, right? Mm-hmm. Our generation, we're kind of the generation that came out where there's a little bit more liberal minded, but the generations before World War I, World War II, very different. Okay. Mm-hmm. They're big believers in the system. They're big believers in, in America, it's very, a good American, right? All these things that it represents. There was a time when that was the practical way. Okay. Mm-hmm. But that is no longer practical, because we're not based on a war economy. We are, but we don't want to be anymore. And we're not going to tolerate it anymore. And it's no longer okay that, oh, well, too bad for those people in Syria, too bad for those people in Colombia, but everything's fine here, in sunny California, and I'm going to go shopping or whatever, right? Like, I'm grateful that I'm born here, but I don't make the ignorant mistake to think that where you're born gives you, there's no greater land or greater people or greater cult, you know what I mean? There's pros and cons to all of it. And this idea of the previous generation, they were coming out of this industrial model, and we need to move out of that, and we need to make accessible the technologies that are already there but are not affordable yet. Mm-hmm. Okay, because it's still evolving. It's like, okay, we have these Tesla cars. It's somewhat of an advancement because it's moving away from the petro, which is a big positive, yet environmentally speaking, it still has a lot of negative impact on the environment. So we're moving closer, but we're not to where we need to be, whereas we're relying upon free energy, right? Which Tesla was speaking about this 100 years ago or however long ago, right? So the original Tesla, I'm talking about, not the company. But, you know, the point is that why are there still wars being fought over oil? You know, like, who's supporting that, right? I don't think anyone I know is supporting that. And so the consciousness is like, we're going to do better when we cooperate. We're going to all do better when we cooperate. And, you know, it's an inner thing, because the warfare, all of these things, it's based upon the division that exists within the mindset. And I don't know the cause, you know, if some religious people say it started in the Garden of Eden and Eve ate the apple, and now, I don't know, right? But where do we go wrong, right? The point is, we need to get back balance.
Yeah. Well, we keep going wrong, right? So, so maybe I don't know, are we even getting less wrong as we go forward? But I think
there's a huge division in humanity going right now. There's a huge division. You see within the children, my children, you know, my son is about to graduate high school, so he's 17, be 18 soon. That generation, my oldest daughter's 5 years older than him. So that generation, you know, I see, you have kids that are super smart, super focused, super aware. And then you have kids that are basically already a failed scenario, which if they don't get the right kind of support and help, you know, I mean, they're going in a very bad direction, because everything is accessible now, all the good and all the bad.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to have the best of the best and the worst of the worst simultaneously. And we have that already, but it accelerates. And so we need to focus on those who are here to make a difference and to serve and make this world a better place for those that follow us, you know, because if you're too old to care anymore, and you're too old and you're too tired to, you know, you want to make a difference, but you don't know how, like, we have to do it individually, and then we have to do it together, because it's a human race. It's a human race. And the thing about a race is you can't win if you don't finish. You got to finish. Persistence is necessary, right? And all of us experience hardship. All of us experience shame and loss, and, you know, all kinds of loss, personal loss, money loss, loss in games, right? It doesn't define, winning and losing doesn't define who we are. It's experience. And there's this dichotomy that exists. There's this division that exists, and it's the educational system that we've been operating under. So the solution involves, among many details, the solution involves a modification of the education systems moving forward. The education systems that are now being put into place and are the educational systems of the future are based on a unified concept. It's not based on a duality, okay? And what I mean by that is there needs to be an understanding of, different cultures have ways of saying it. The Chinese have this yin and yang, which I think is a great way to describe it. But in the way that we see the world, we have to understand that the two are just expressions of the one. It's the sunny side of the mountain and it's the shady side of the mountain. We have to move away from the idea that the day is good and the night is bad, and the sun is good and the rain is bad. And, you know, if your skin's light color, that means one thing. And if it's a dark, we need to move away from seeing differentiation, because the differentiation is just the least of what it is. The visible is the least. When we see a person and we just, oh, this person's this language or this religion, and you're formulating ideas about that person, you haven't made any contact at all with that person. they are so much more like you than you even realize.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been to 70 countries around the world teaching kettlebells. And if I had that idea before, now I have that idea with a very extensive experiential evidence to tell me that we are much more similar than we are different. And it has nothing to do with where we were born or the language we speak or the religion we inherited from our parents or any of these things. And, you know, at a fundamental level, and we have to move back to the fundamentals. And so again, how do we do that? Well, it has to be through the physical education, because we have the fight and flight. These are our survival mechanisms. And it hasn't been that long that we've been existing on these pristinely paved cities with walls. It was several hundred years ago, we were out barefoot or with, you know, strips of cloth on the bottom of our feet, looking for food and, you know, living in the forests, maybe living in the caves, depending on where you come from, you know, living in the trees. We weren't the dominant animals. It wasn't that long ago. Like we have archaeological records, and we're finding more and more through the carbon dating techniques, right? So humans have been here for more than 100,000 years. They think at least 200,000 years now. So, you know, like how long ago was it? Was it my great? That was, we weren't sitting in chairs. We weren't, you know, taking elevators. We were looking around and we were running and being hunting, you know, and now we're sitting in these cubicles because that's what we've been programmed to do, starting with the public miseducation. Okay. Sorry if you're a teacher, nothing about, but there's better ways of doing all of it. So that the education of the future now with our children, what is their aptitude? What do they enjoy? What are they interested in? What are they good at? Okay, not, you know what, I want you to be a doctor. I want you to be a lawyer. I want you to be this. Why? Oh, because it makes good money. And that's part of the corruption. Okay, because if you want to be a doctor because it's a good paying job, you're not in medicine anymore. You're now in business. And that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem because that's how we are getting educated in that model. And we need to understand that, you know what, the true doctor is the pinnacle of society. And the true doctors know they don't do the healing. They facilitate the healing. They know there's a greater power. You can call it God. You can call it love. You can call it goddess. You can call it whatever you want or don't call it anything. But there's a power that exists that is the healing, that heals everything. And again, it's love. We have to love ourselves. Movement is how we do that. We do that through movement. We do that through breathing, and we do that through the experience of, okay, there's pain in my body. Let me go into that. Let me look at that. Let me not fight it and resist it. Let me stop seeing it as bad.
Yeah.
Let me understand that the bad is the good, and the rain, I need the rain because I love flowers so much. I can't just worship the sunny days. I have to, oh, it's rainy, horrible day. No, accept. And now we understand that the culture has been programmed to identify in a certain way of what it means to be successful. And we have to redefine that now. We have to look at the economy of well-being as a metric that, you know what, a life well lived means I'm healthy as much or probably more than it means that you have a certain amount of money in the bank, right? And there's so many things that we have to do with society, but I just know the way forward is those of us that have committed our life to certain skills and certain crafts. We have to, in that sense, really stay in our lane with the work, where it's like, you know, I teach people how to move better. I teach people how to go into themselves through the breathing and through the use of your awareness and the movement. And it's about empowering the individual. It's not a model where, you know what, I need X number of clients, X number of hours, and I'm charging X number of dollars because I need to calculate that's not the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I know, and again, don't feel bad. I'm not accusing anyone. We've inherited this industry and this civilization's way of worshiping the industrialization of these arts and crafts that never should have been corrupted in that way. Because if you were a farmer 100 years ago, you were just growing food.
Mm-hmm.
And now if you're a farmer, you need to look at, well, if I don't get a government subsidy, I'm going to lose my farm that has been feeding my family for how many generations, right? Well, okay, so now I'm going to take the government subsidy. Oh, well, you have to grow these crops now with these seeds. Oh, and by the way, there's one company that owns all of the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? The one that owns all the patents on the viruses, those companies have now merged. Now it's one company. They own all the seeds. So they control all the food and they control all the pharmaceuticals. And we need to develop awareness about these things that are going on, and we need to overcome those great challenges. And I think the way forward is just, we have to take care of ourselves, our families, our communities. And it starts with the exercise. It's the only thing we have, because now I'm a big believer. I have utmost faith, because I know that we have been here before. We have done this before, and we are the survivors, all of us, right? Like, if you're here right now, you're a survivor. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of those other cells that were competing, they never made it, right? And whatever, however you want to look at it. If you're here, you're so rare and so precious already. So just accept that.
Yeah.
See it for what it is. Okay. And you're responsible for taking care of that. You're responsible for loving yourself. You're responsible for loving yourself. And when you accept that you deserve love, then from there, you can forgive. Mm-hmm. When you love, when you forgive, then you can face the pain, and the pain no longer has power over you, because you understand that your God, which is love, is the greatest and is more powerful than those fears and those evils. Because when the light is shined, darkness cannot stand in the light. It's not possible, because it's too. So, every person has to make a decision. Am I going to be responsible for the gift that I've been given, which is this human body? Mm-hmm. And, again, there's practical tools. Our ancestors knew these things. They lived in harmony with the nature. Our ancestors, they didn't exercise. They didn't need to, they didn't program exercise. They lived. And in living, they were animals. And that's what I'm saying, is we are animals. We've always been animals, but we've been convinced that we are not animals, and we are separate from the animals. And it's caused all kinds of confusion and corruption, and it set us on a path where now our bodies are broken and stuff. Because you think animals have bad backs? You think only animals that have these problems are dogs, because they've been humanized and domesticated. So they get bad hips and they get bad knees because of the foods they're being fed, and because they're living with man. Because we made a pact with the wolves way back when, and we're like, okay, we're gonna work together and we're gonna hunt. And that's what happened with the dogs. So the dogs are the only animal really that have human illnesses that you start seeing now. But that's because, again, they were taken out of. Again, it's not to be negative. We are where we are. Like, you didn't do it, I didn't do it. Right? I was born into this world. So I'm not saying, hey, anarchy. I'm not saying we're going to go back to the forest and hang in the trees. If you want to do that, fine. I'm saying we're going to a place where there's balance between technology and nature, man, machine, and we have to visualize in our minds, what's the cities of the future going to look like? What's the education of the future going to look like? What's the medicine of the future going to look like? And whatever part we play in this is professionally and individually. We all do our own parts, but that salvation is, again, taking care of our well-being, taking care of our physical, and taking care of our emotional. And the mental is the mental is what connects the mind with the body, or I should say the mind is what connects the breath with the body. Okay, the mind, it's the body, the breath, right? So the body's the movement, the breath, and now the awareness, and you're harmonizing that. And so in doing that, we get to experience presence. We get to experience presence, and it can be any exercise. It doesn't matter the exercise. It's whatever brings you joy. In this process, we can heal ourselves, and there's specialists that can help. If you don't know how to do it yourself, there's specialists that have specialized information that can give you pieces. However, the work is still up to each individual. Once we have the information, knowledge is power when it's applied. And so, that's, you and I are in the field of giving knowledge and good information in the health. And, and again, you're big-minded in that way also, in the same idea that you understand that fitness is a part of something bigger. And, even if we say fitness, health, there's something even bigger than health, and I call that the well-being, because I can be physically healthy and mentally way out of balance, or I can have an unhealthy relationship, an unhealthy family situation, an unhealthy professional situation, right? So we want to look at kind of the big picture of the important aspects of life, and where am I more healthy, where am I less healthy, where do I need to put a little more energy. I think the center of the wheel is the physical body. The center of that is, because if I'm really successful in the money part and I don't have my health, well, or I'm really successful in any of these other parts and I don't have, I can have none of those other things, but if I have my health and I have my well-being, I'm okay, right? I just need a little bit of food and a place to be sheltered from the environment. Like, everyone has different needs in terms of material needs, but in terms of primitive needs, physical education is the way forward for all of us. And I know you're here to help. I'm here to help. Let's get healthy. Let's get healthy, and let's be strong. And then those of us that are strong, let's help the people that aren't so strong and help them, because the human race, we got to move forward. We got to move forward together. We can't move forward by eliminating other tribes where we're just going to kill each other off. That's not the way that we're going to finish the race. Okay. And the ship's sailing, and all men and women and children on board. It's like that. Right. So the ship doesn't leave until everyone's on board. So now it's like, I got to help this person, because I can't leave until they're ready to leave. Okay. So to be helpful is the most selfish thing we can do, because we help ourselves by helping others.
We do. So when you, if you have somebody who is listening to this and thinking, like they're in the beginning of their fitness journey, or they're getting back into things, so like getting back to fitness after, say, an injury or life happened, right? Life has been happening a lot recently. So if they've been struggling, how, I guess, like that sort of mindset of perseverance, that sort of the inner strength that kind of just gives you that a little bit of a push to just do a little bit. And then I think it informs that once they see themselves making progress, is there some like wisdom you could offer them, like in how, especially as you're maybe getting older, so like you might have like, oh, but I need like a special program now, or is there a way to kind of view this no matter what age you are? Like, is it mindset that you can kind of go in with, and then where could people find, because I know you're doing some kettlebell classes and mobility classes,
Yeah.
so those things as well would probably be really helpful for people.
Really looking at breathing as the foundation and on all areas of the spectrum. So from the spectrum of, I haven't exercised for a really long time, I don't feel good, my body is deconditioned, but I need to start, I want to start. I don't feel comfortable doing maybe certain things I'm seeing that it's too intense for me. What can I do right now from where I'm at? Okay, so from that point of view, breathing is the first and foremost, because just some simple deep breathing, it has so much influence and impact on the endocrine system and the regulation of the body, of the hormonal system, of the blood pressure, of the circulation. So specifically, Qigong is what I'm most familiar with. So Qigong is a body of information. It has its origins in China. The most common is Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there's all kinds of Tai Chi. Listen, YouTube is our friend. Like, we can learn if you don't have a reference, especially in the pandemic era, right? It's like if we're at home, well, we have the internet and we can find good information, but the idea of just slowly moving and breathing, where now I'm inhaling and I'm exhaling and I'm slowing it down so I can feel and be aware. I'm feeling my hands move through the air. And if I go slow enough, I can feel the air moving through the fingers. So I find that flow, that coordination. Can I go slower? Can I go slower, slower, slower in the world that keeps trying to tell you to go faster, faster, and faster? So that's the starting point. And there's so much there. All the way to the other extreme of, oh, you're a high-level functioning athlete. If you want to go next level, if you're already high level and you're going to go to the highest you can possibly be, now you need to understand that breathing is the new strength training. Mm-hmm. Because you got all the other stuff down. You're fit, you're strong, you got good technique. But how can you get better? Become a better breather. Okay, so breathing is for everyone. That's the foundation. What I'm doing with IKFF programs, yes, kettlebell can be very intense, obviously. Mm-hmm. And, it's really designed to add intensity to whatever else you're doing, so what I say is, do whatever you're doing. And if you want more intensity, just add kettlebells, because that's going to take care of the intensity part. But intensity is relative to the level. So if you're very deconditioned, walking up a flight of steps could potentially be intense, right? So it's not about killing ourselves. It's about getting the intensity where we're breathing heavy. Okay, and so kettlebell at an entry level is fantastic, because if I have a condition where I have too much weight, where there's obesity or just a big person that's carrying too much weight, running and jumping and things like this it's not going to be a starting point for a very long time. There's too much stress on the joints. The kettlebell will allow the type of intensity that you would normally get from jumping and running. It'll allow the same intensity without the jumping. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it's much more forgiving on the joints. Okay, so I'm doing kettlebells, but even more, I would say, broad is the mobility. What I'm doing with mobility, that's a big word. Mm-hmm. Movement, right? Human locomotion, mobility. So there's many ways we can view mobility. Walking on your hands could be an expression of mobility, right? Where I'm coming at it from is very practical from the point of view of a martial artist, in that we have fundamental reflexes, which is fight and flight. Okay, and again, if we're talking origins, where we came from, we're not that far removed from it. And so even though we may not use these instincts in our day-to-day, they're sort of dormant in many cases. at some fundamental level, they're always present. Okay. And part of the problem with imbalance in the health and things like this is the fact that we often in our society are not actively utilizing these fight and flight responses and responding to them. So the flight, well, that's locomotion. You got to move because there's a danger, or you got to move because you need to chase the food before it gets away, or you're not going to eat for another 3 days, right? So that's the flight. You got to go. So you got to be effective at moving. And then there's the fight. Well, your back's against the wall. There's nowhere to go. So now it's kill or be killed, right? That's a primitive instinct. And I would say that the fitness, the way it's gone in recent time with the CrossFit and the Metcon and all these primal this and primal that, people are crying out. They want that. They miss that because we don't do that in our lives. We only can do it at the gym in the world that we exist in, right? There's a need for that primitive, so the martial art is about the fight, but from a physical education point of view, we need to understand both components, the fight, the flight. How do you effectively hold your space, right? Where not moving, I need to hold my space. I need to have a strong foundation and a strong base versus, okay, I got to move and I got to change base and do these things, right? So the mobility, it's focusing on the flight component, but it's coming with the understanding of the fight component. And so I'm taking martial art principle and techniques and I'm applying it to the general population, because in understanding that, you understand how to perfect the movements, because movements have a purpose, movements have a function. And a lot of the greater fitness community, you have movement without purpose. The purpose becomes burning calories, or it becomes the completion of some circuit or some program without a deep understanding of the integration of the mind and the body, and without a deep understanding of how am I actually going to utilize this movement in my day-to-day? Where does it transfer? Because in my opinion, and I say this again, having this experience of going on 40 years and still performing at a high level, I know that the reason I'm able to do that is because I was exposed to that understanding at early on in the fitness. So I've always trained with the idea that what is the application of this movement that I'm doing? And then I, matured to the point where I'm at an age that I don't do anything that I cannot utilize to be more effective at either the fight or the flight. If it doesn't make me move better or fight better, it has no place in my program, because it's a complete waste of my time and energy. I need to have function. And so that's what I'm doing with the mobility, is I'm teaching movements of how to create space between the joints. Okay, so it's joint mobility, it's change of base. We have to understand the center of mass and the relationship to the earth, the base of support, gravity, right? Gravity. And so changing the base, we need to lower the base, we need to raise the base. When you understand these things, it all comes together, the fight and the flight. Because if I want to move my base, I want a high base as much as possible. If I can get my base high, I can move easier. If I need to maintain my position stability, then I need to be able to drop my base. Okay, so there's a lot of techniques that I'm doing, but equally important is the education component. So we understand that as you're learning these techniques, you're learning fundamental movement principles that apply to human locomotion as a global idea, not specific to this technique, that technique. There's lots of techniques. We're never going to learn all the techniques, but the thing about it is, when you really understand all the techniques, you realize that there's only just a few. There's up, down, there's all around. Okay,
Yeah.
so um,
That's really helpful.
yeah,
That,
you know,
yeah.
and anything that we don't understand, it looks foreign, but then we start seeing, we can take a language with 26 letters and we can make how many hundreds of thousands of words from that, right? By understanding how, but there's only just a few. There's only just a few strokes, right? Musical notes, Roy B. Jiv, right? There's only a few. So we create everything out of just a basic few things. You talk about humanity, early man, early woman, stick and stone, fire, and rope. Stick, stone, fire, rope. Those are the fundamental technologies that we started from. And now we have iPhone, right? We have all these things. Yeah, so I know I covered a lot of ground, but
Yeah.
what I do with the mobility is I'm teaching breathing. I'm teaching balance and understanding, exploring how when we change base and the influence of the inner ear, the vestibular system, the influence of the visual system, we start closing our eyes, turning our head. We're developing more awareness of the sensitivity of how everything is connected. And now we're bringing this into our movements. And then we have ideas about coiling core. Coiling core is a locomotive function, right? There's some erroneous beliefs in fitness and strength conditioning that believes that the core does not transmit power, or excuse me, that the core does not generate power, it only transmits power.
Yeah.
And so you have this idea of anti-rotation and, brace the core, which does have its applications, but it also is not appropriate in many other cases. Actually, if I had no arms and I had no legs, if I only had stubs, right? If I only had stubs, could I still eat? Could I still get food? Yes, because what would happen is I would locomote. Right? I would locomote, and it would take me longer. And but the coaches are saying, oh, you need to swing your arms and drive your feet into the ground and keep this stiff, because they misunderstand. But no. So we actually have these spiraling figure eight integration of the core. Okay, so I'm getting into that, teaching how to understand that, how to apply that to movement. And then we're getting into all of these hip mobility movements where we're learning to get off the ground and stand up without using the hands.
Yeah.
Which is very important for longevity. There's a correlation between your lifespan and if you can get up off the ground without putting your hands down. So if I have to put my hands down in order to stand up, and if I have to put my hands down in order to get back on the ground. And so we want to develop the ability to be able to get up and down without using the hands and shifting the weight without using the hands, which is core function. So there's a lot of value in terms of understanding these principles, and I'm providing techniques to integrate into our training with the end result of becoming more practical in our understanding of locomotion, human locomotion, be a better mover.
Yeah, I like that. Is that, you were mentioned it was like the general population? Is this one of the courses that you offer on your website?
So my focus, my certification courses, the real focus is for fitness professionals, because I'm educating in not just the movements, but how to teach it. For general population, I have a weekly class, and that weekly class is really for everybody. And that's where I'm teaching, and there's no set curriculum. Rather, I'm answering questions or taking questions or applying the information that's going to be really useful to the participants in the class, right? And so every week it can be different.
Right.
So I'm doing that on Tuesdays. I'm doing that Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and I'm alternating kettlebell and mobility. So next week is mobility, the following week is kettlebell, and I'm doing it like that. So that's really for general population. And then I have my certification courses, which also can be general, you know, any fitness enthusiast that just wants to learn and wants to, you know, learn more techniques and learn more knowledge. But as far as how I'm catering, I'm really focused on the fitness pro who is looking to teach this information to other people. So it's the teaching methodology as well as the practical application.
Yeah. And people can reach out to you for the certification. That's on ikff.net, and then they just reach out to you on Instagram, like I did, because I went to one of your classes.
Yeah, absolutely. Instagram is the platform I use the most.
Awesome.
And so anyone can just send me a message, and I'm definitely happy to talk to you and answer your questions, and I'll give options for different classes that I have.
Cool. Yeah, and I really liked your the take you have on the spine and sort of that generating force, and to kind of help people move away from keeping it so rigid all the time and being fearful of bending the back, and like just what a wonderful structure the spine is, that it's made of so many bones, it's there to move, and it should be celebrated that we can, if we didn't have any arms or legs, we could still get around somehow.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing that up. So
Thank you.
And I really appreciate your time, and it's
Thank you. I appreciate yours as well, Marianne. I think it's a great platform that you provide, and I'm really happy to have had a chance to share.
Well, I appreciate it. And and I hopefully be able to make it to one of the classes again. I'm trying to get to the mobility one as well, because I feel like that's going to be really something I can learn a lot from. And if I can just get my daughter
really
to bed on time.
I know you're going to like it. Yeah, awesome. I know you're going to like it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you. Really a pleasure.